Hey guys, another One Take review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Rosalia album, Motomami. Motomami is the third album from Spanish art pop slash whatever in the name of God you could refer to this album and the prior Rosalia album, artist Rosalia, and she kind of took the non-English speaking world by storm a few years back, and also managed to sneak in a bit into the at least the English speaking world as well. That was a pretty major achievement considering A, she is a Spanish artist, and B, she is a very, very alternative artist as well. But she managed to kind of sneak in there, and I mean, hey, there's even an Eminem package that's based around one of her album covers now, so she's kind of a big deal now. But my point is, she has had an interesting history so far with only her third album, and her third album is just as experimental as her second, which was her first transition into the more experimental side of sort of pop music, of course. And I will say that, to say the very least, people were very patiently waiting for Motomami to come out. This is already one of the most creative albums of the year, as I expected. Motomami combines regular mainstream Spanish pop music with sort of art pop as well, and there's some R&B kind of influences sprinkled about in there carefully. It's interesting stuff, and while I won't say that Rosalia has the most unique aesthetic or style, some people could definitely argue that fellow musician Arca has been doing the same exact thing, or at least similar things, with 2020 and 2021's five-part Kick series of albums. I will say that no matter what, Rosalia is a very interesting performer in the way that she performs, and absolutely stands out in the wide sea of artsy kind of pop performers. This is all helped by Rosalia's very prominent presence on Motomami, which is, it just defines the album overall, really. She has multiple layers as a performer as well, which I think makes for a very quirky and at times very odd album, but still something that's very fun to listen to. There's one side of her that's very like party animal-ish, very upbeat, just sort of hell-bent on having a good time and or setting something on fire. However, there are other more mellow tracks that see Rosalia show off her more tender side as a performer, which is kind of the side of her music that I personally prefer a little bit more for no particular reason. And no matter what style you prefer, no matter how well you think they mesh together, there's no denying that Rosalia's kind of eccentricity and kind of mixing of style or styles, I guess I should say, is something to really be amazed by. Things especially become impressive when Rosalia, as an artist herself, manages to stand out next to the extreme amounts of experimentation that are done throughout this record. My biggest issue with Motomami, though, is that exact experimentation. There are many examples of chances to be traditionally kind of pleasing to the ear being sacrificed to be experimental, and I think that's something very artistically respectable and something fantastic from an artistic standpoint, but it makes for a less than pleasing listen at times. I do want to add in that I always review these albums from a casual listener standpoint, or at least try my best to for the most part, so that definitely has something to do with it as well. If I were looking at things totally 100% exclusively, not whether or not I enjoyed it, but just is this good in a more objective, I guess, and I hate to say objective because nothing in music is objective, but a slightly more objective sense of the term, then in that case, that would be yes, it's fantastic. But I'm looking at this in terms of just how much I enjoyed it, and I have to say I'm kind of, just the way the experimentation is played out, I'm kind of 50-50 on most of this album. My personal favorite tracks include songs like Diablo and Candy because they manage to perfectly knead together the more experimental side of Rosalia's music while also being a just fantastic example of straightforward art pop. Nonetheless, Motomami is equivalent to that of an Andy Warhol film in the way that it's just meant to be appreciated and experienced as an artistic piece, and not so much as something that you would directly enjoy in the same way that you would other things within the same form of media, or at least that's the way I personally view it. This leaves me conflicted because the more artsy side of me is very content with this album and what is being done, but the more I'm just listening to this casually for the sake of reviewing it kind of side is sort of frustrated, and I just have difficulty finding reason to re-listen to this for more than just doing this review right now. And even with a deeper, more analytical look into my own thoughts on this album and what I thought about this record and the experience that it delivered to me as I listened to it, I'm still on the fence about how the experimentation was executed, and I'll just leave that up for you who are watching this to decide on how that went, because frankly, I just have no idea really how to feel about it. I will say at the very least that Motomami is benefited by a lot of shorter track lengths that allow some of the more experimental but less interesting pieces to just kind of do their thing, wrap up, and either go in one ear and out the other, which is a portion of them, or just kind of leave you kind of impressed of whatever it is that they just did, which is another pretty good portion of them. And either which way, those shorter song lengths really do work and benefit the album. That doesn't stop some songs, however, like Q, or I guess I should say Q, because it's like 50 U's in the title, from being just a bit too scatterbrained, or songs like Chicken Teriyaki for being just a bit too boring, at least in my personal opinion, for my personal taste, for my own personal liking. Overall, I do think that Motomami kind of loses its way a couple of times here or there in terms of the actual, again, execution of the experimentalism here. And I wish that there was something a little bit more to enjoy, but there are just times where I feel like there was less need for experimentation to make a better album overall. Experimentalism does not immediately mean that you've made something great. Experimentalism mixed with something that's actually enjoyable means that you made something great. And there's just sometimes where I can only appreciate this album from an artist's perspective, not from a listener's perspective. But I digress. The shorter song lengths on Motomami do make for a less tiresome listen overall. So, overall, Motomami is a very out there album in terms of experimentation. Obviously, this isn't The Residents or anything in that sort of vein, but at the same time, this is the farthest that you can push pop music, at least in the current world of pop music, before it no longer becomes modern pop in the traditional sense of the term. Nonetheless, though, I do feel like one of this record's biggest problems is that it can't go for more than 2 minutes without just being a chaotic mess at times, and while there are a couple great moments, every great moment is accompanied by 3 or 4 decent moments that are only decent because they are artistically very intelligent, but really not that interesting to actually listen to just from a casual listening perspective. And personally, for albums like these, I look for something that'll really stimulate both sides, that artistic side and that casual side. And, well, unfortunately, this only does one of those two things. So, with that being said, I'm going to give this album a 3 out of 5, and I would like to give it higher, but I just can't bring myself to. So, yeah, 3 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.